10 after. Are you ready?
Not yet. How are you? Okay. We're ready when you are.
I'm not hearing you.
Testing, 1, 2.
Okay, all right. So I will call the Oregon City Commission to order for Wednesday, April 17, 2019. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Here. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. Please stand and join me in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so under ceremonies, proclamations, and presentations, we have an update from our Metro Councilor, Christine Lewis. There you are. I didn't see you back there.
Good to see you, Mayor.
Me too.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors, for having me here tonight. My name is Christine Lewis, and I am here just to say hi and let you know a little bit about what is happening at Metro. Also happy to take questions, but my hope is that I will be here. Thank you. And we'll have a two-way dialogue in the future. Oh, there we go. We've got 3 new counselors, and I'm one of them, but we also have welcomed a new president for the region, Metro Council President Lynn Peterson, probably a familiar face to many of you. Councilor Juan Carlos Gonzalez and I all were sworn into office in January, so I believe we're on week 15 of our new jobs. I know some of you are even newer than we are, so I won't try and use the new card here tonight. But really happy to be doing the work that I am, not only for Metro, but representing the communities here in Clackamas County, including Oregon City. One thing that's going on is Parks and Nature. We, at the beginning of the year, had the ribbon cutting and welcoming of new facilities at Oxbow Regional Park. The new Welcome Center features informational displays about the park, geology, plants, and animals, as well as art reflective of the park's surroundings. This is important because this is one of the crown jewels of our park system. And as I'm here tonight, we are in the final stages of coming together as council to discuss a potential renewal this November of our parks bond. Voters across Greater Portland and the region have had the opportunity 2 times to fund Metro Parks, and we would be going out this November at the same rate to continue to invest in our Metro Park system. The program areas that we would invest in would include land acquisition and restoration, improvement of our Metro Parks, so taking care of what we have with increased facilities like restrooms and welcome centers and picnic tables, community grants, local government allocations, so that's the local share that we've had successful partnerships with before, trails, and then urban transformation or other big projects. And it's really important here in Oregon City to focus on that last bucket because Willamette Falls would fall under that, but $20 million of investment in Willamette Falls Phase 2. And just to be very clear, that is an essential part of this measure for me and my support. So we are going through our final process as council of getting our arms around what our priorities are. The next steps include the chief operating officer giving us her recommendation. And then we will make edits to that kind of final package and then hopefully a referral in the next couple of months. So now is the time for us to be engaging if there are any pieces missing for this community. Commissioner Smith, you asked me a really smart question this morning that I didn't know the answer at the time, but I do now, about how local share works. Local share is actually allocated by our property value at the county level, and then from the county to the cities by per capita or by head. So we're as Clackamas County definitely going to get kind of the better end of that stick since we have more property value than the per capita breakdown as a county. Garbage and recycling, just a couple of updates here. So regarding food scraps, last July, Metro Council adopted a regional requirement for businesses to separate food scraps from the garbage stream starting in 2020. And so by July 31 of this year, city and county governments are required to amend ordinances or collection franchises. And I'm just here to let you know that those conversations are really important. Hopefully, updated ordinances are coming in front of council. Metro wants to be a partner in this. Clackamas County is in the lead here. But in order to make sure that we are in compliance, the food scrap ordinance, in moving forward, Metro is working with regional, from the regional perspective with local governments, to implement that ordinance on food scraps.
So where are you gonna send this to?
I don't know, actually.
Well, wouldn't it make
It's-
sense to have a facility before you start enforcing, this collection process?
And that's a question I should follow up on because I do believe we have food compost facilities. I don't know exactly where they are.
That's just not the case.
Okay.
You don't have a facility that's big enough to implement this ordinance. And that's, a big question that I've always had with Metro is that you seem to get the cart before the horse in the fact that, you're requiring this food scrap program, but you have no place to send it. And it doesn't really take into account the local businesses that are, a mainstay of our economy. B&B Leasing is our garbage company here. How are they supposed to take these food scraps to wherever this facility's gonna be? Likely it's gonna be out in Washington County somewhere, so it's gonna cost a ton of money. Plus they have to have separate vehicles for this stuff. You can't put garbage in the same, vehicle that you're gonna put this food scrap waste into. So, a garbage truck costs $150,000, $200,000. That's fine for somebody like Waste Management, that's a worldwide company that can buy trucks, every day. B&B and other places, that the folks that deal with Canby and other small towns around the region, they aren't these giant, garbage collection companies that can afford to, to do all this stuff. How are you gonna compensate those businesses?
I hear that question and I don't know all the answers. I did listen to a presentation from Clackamas County to council at Happy Valley last night about their implementation and the work that they're doing. And I didn't get into the granular detail of where the food scraps go to be processed. I did hear about the public involvement that was done by both Metro and the county. And it sounded like there were not many questions or letters of opposition raised during public comment, so.
That's because there wasn't much public
Okay.
input. They went around to some places, like C4 and the Washington County Coordinating Committee and stuff like that. But you didn't come down to Oregon City and give us a detailed I should say your colleague Claudia Collette did not give us a detailed, description of how this was going to work. It seems like Metro consistently says, we have this really cool goal, let's just write the legislation and see how it works out. Instead of, in business, we would say, we have a goal, we're gonna write a business plan and how it's gonna work, we're gonna determine the costs, we're gonna determine, what the employees and the other things are, how the systems are gonna work. And once we figured all that out, then we implement, not the other way around.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm hearing you and I'm 15 weeks into the job, which
I
is
understand, but.
long enough for me to have better answers,
Sure.
I admit, but what I pledge to you is I'll be here more often
Okay.
than folks have been in the past.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay. In terms of recycling, Metro is coordinating with local governments to develop our implementation strategy around the 2030 plan that was just passed on March 7th. So I say that knowing that I haven't been here in front of you. I don't know if staff have, but since we just passed a 2030 regional waste plan, maybe I'll engage more deeply so that we know in that plan where we're going as a region in terms of our recycling and our solid waste.
Okay. So currently, with the Chinese ban on recycling, how much of the stuff that we actually put in the gray containers that are recycling actually goes to a recycling center now?
I don't have that number. And I know that across the state, it's been very challenging in different areas, and DEQ's numbers are pretty startling.
Okay.
But I am committed to making sure that Metro continues to help the folks who are trying to do the innovative work so that we're not relying on the Chinese market.
All right.
I'd like to talk now about transportation. I believe many folks know that Metro's role in transportation is not as a provider of transit services or as road builders, but we are the planners. And as we look towards November of 2020, we are considering a measure to invest in regional transportation solutions. We have polled voters about their support for investing in major arterials and the corridors that they need to get from home to work, from work to school, from school to places where they recreate. And we found that it's a high priority for voters, and there's a willingness to pay in order to fix our congestion problems and our safety problems. The willingness to pay by no means makes a 2020 ballot measure a slam dunk, and we have a lot of work to do to put a transportation measure on the ballot. We are underway right now with a task force of 35 individuals advising Metro Council, made up of the business community, individuals who are transportation advocates, as well as elected officials from across the region, in order to help identify our corridors and our places for investment. And one of the main takeaways from the poll is that whatever we do, we need to make sure that we're building a program that really helps everyone, no matter how they get around, whether it's by car, by bus, by bike, by foot, or one of the new emerging technologies. So our transportation task force is at the point where they are working on narrowing down the corridors that are going to get further evaluation and study. And I would encourage us to be in direct communication and you with some of the folks representing Clackamas County on that task force to make sure corridors important to this part of the region are lifted.
Well, just so you know, a number of us, Commissioner Lyle Smith, myself, a number of people in the audience just attended a gathering on that with our state representatives, our county people, ODOT.
I was there last night as well,
And
yeah,
you know,
it was a good conversation.
You heard the
Yeah.
task at hand, and it's not small.
Yeah.
And the priorities remain to be set, and they seem to be focused on the I-205 corridor first, and we've got our own concerns up here.
Yeah, and I
So,
think for
You were there.
the state perspective, I do agree that fixing the funding gap in 205 is a state priority. When we're looking at what Metro is going to do as a region, it's not that. It is the corridors like 99, where it's arterials, where people are moving, goods are moving, and the congestion and the safety issues are as bad as they are, absolutely. That's where our focus is.
If I could comment, you know, as part of the C4 Coordinating Council, I represent Oregon City on that, where we have talked with Chair Bernard from Clackamas County, Mayor Gamba from the city of Milwaukee is involved. And they are all looking at the priority corridors, and we have been vocal about Highway 213. Highway 213 is a project that is on the list that is being evaluated as a project. It's among a list, there's a lot of corridors and there's a lot of needs, but I would like to relay that that corridor is on the list.
Yep, it is on the list, thank you.
I think the most redeeming comment made last night was the understanding that transportation is not a standalone issue. That's related to housing and development and economics and the Beaver Creek area, that how are people that we want to situate there going to transport their goods and services. It is not a standalone issue, and once we realize that, we have to take the whole thing as a package and not transportation alone.
That's absolutely right, and it unlocks huge potential for economic development, but it also unlocks potential for human development, and that's not said enough, so thank you for raising that. Next, I want to give an update on where we are with affordable housing. We, as a region, all three counties passed the affordable housing measure last November, and we are moving forward with implementation. We voted in January to appoint 13 people to our oversight committee, and they will continue to meet, but I believe they've already had 4 meetings in order to really make sure that they understand the measure that was passed and also the parameters that are being set for implementation. They're reviewing the plans for housing development from 7 jurisdictions, and here in Oregon City, Clackamas is our local jurisdiction that will receive the funds, to make sure that our plans are responsible and reasonable in order to meet the goals. And a reminder that they're going to be tracking the construction of 3,900 homes planned from the bond measure for across the region. And this work is gonna take time, and as you know, it can take months to go from concept to permitting. But we are excited that we have pilot projects available, so each jurisdiction can put forward 1 pilot project. And City of Beaverton has already put forward a project that's underway. So Clackamas County can put forward a pilot project even before the entire plan is put together. So we are very serious about getting these dollars into development as quickly as possible, since we know the need is so great.
Before you move on, could you talk a little bit about the committee and what's the representation of that group?
Sure, and I originally had that list of the roster of 13 and included in this packet. It's not in front of me here, but it includes several individuals who are from the development community. Some of our folks representing Clackamas County include somebody who works for the AARP. We have a construction worker, she's an electrician, she's from Clackamas County. We have somebody who works with domestic violence and housing representing Clackamas County. So we actually have 3 or 4 folks of the 13 from Clackamas County, but the committee itself not only works in housing development, but also on the human services side, and does include somebody who's experienced houselessness herself.
What about like regular people?
And
Not affiliated with any of these industries, but like just a regular citizen.
I think there's several folks there who are just actually regular people. I would actually point to our electrician, as she's just a normal person, but she does build things.
I meant regular, I mean not affiliated with the development industry, not affiliated with the trades, not affiliated, somebody that just represents the public at large.
Yeah, there's no just public at large. Everybody's bringing
And these
some
people
level of
are all from
credential.
Clackamas County. Is there a Clackamas City's representative?
It's 13 people from across the region, and none of them are there strictly on behalf of Clackamas County. I did
You're saying they
actually,
just live in Clackamas County.
yes.
So the reason my question was, is how are we as citizens of this community going to be able to get input to those people about what they're looking at and what they're proposing to do?
Yeah, so I think on what Clackamas County is proposing to do, Clackamas County is running the process for how the Clackamas dollars will be spent. The oversight committee is more about, are the bond dollars achieving the program needs as effectively as possible? But
So
in
then I
terms
need-
of the plan,
So I need to talk to Clackamas County.
Clackamas County Housing, yep, and there's actually a process underway for them to write the plan for the entire county and all the jurisdictions within the county.
Yeah, I obviously would be very interested in making sure that our input has a substantial amount of influence in this process.
Yes, yeah. It's money that was raised at our level, but the point of the bond was really to empower the community level development. So, yep,
Perfect.
Clackamas County would be who I refer you to. Yeah. And then I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we have grant programs, including our 2040 planning and development grants and our community placemaking grants. 2040 planning grants have a April 19th deadline, so that's very close. But just wanting to make sure that the community is aware that our equitable housing and economic opportunity money comes through a grant process that works directly with community. And then in terms of our community placemaking grants, those projects support creative projects and proposals that empower and involve community members to make changes they want to see in their neighborhoods. And the community placemaking grants for 2019 are in the process of being awarded, but I will be out ringing the bell and banging the drum because we did not have very many applications from Clackamas County this year. I sat on the review committee, I believe there were 2. So for 2020, I will be out here and I will be handing out paper applications if they are on paper. If they're not, I will be printing out the application on little, or the digital link on little cards, because I really want to see Clackamas County organizations, governments, nonprofits try and take advantage of our community placemaking grants.
Okay, well, I make sure you check in with me about that. I have a couple of organizations that I'm aware of that would be interested in that.
Great, thank you. I think probably we'll talk in the fall. Yeah, thank you. And then Metro does fun things as well. We have our convention center, Center for the Arts, P5, Oregon Zoo, and Expo Center. And then really wanting to raise up the work that we do around making sure that people know that we have some community days at the zoo where there's discounted tickets. And Expo Center and Oregon Convention Center do have community events. It's not all about getting folks in from out of town, but it is community building here locally as well. And with that, you've already asked a number of questions, but thank you for your time, and I will welcome input and increased communication as we move forward on these projects.
Anybody have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you,
No.
Counselor.
Yeah,
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, so back to the agenda, and we are at citizen, oh, no,
Mayoral
I got some appointments to make apparently. So I'm gonna appoint, Tim West to the Transportation Advisory Committee for a 3-year term, April 17th, 2019, December 31st, 2021. Appointment of Ben Simmons to the Transportation Advisory Committee, filling a vacancy for the remainder of the term ending December 31st, 2020. And I'm also appointing Commissioner McGriff to the Downtown Oregon City Association as our liaison to the Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition and as an alternate to MPAC. With that, we'll move on. Citizen comment. I have some citizen comment here, but I want to make clear that if you're coming at this point in the meeting, it's something that's not currently on the agenda. So if you are talking about something that's not on the agenda, then I'll welcome you now. If you're talking about coming for the code update or something else that's on the agenda, then I appreciate it if you wait until that point in time. So, Mr. Black, is this something that's not on the agenda tonight? Come on up.
All right, good evening.
evening.
Colin Black, I'm the Senior Center Manager for Gladstone Senior Center. Thanks for taking time to see me tonight. So I'm here on behalf of the City Council and the Mayor and the City of Gladstone to take a moment to thank the Pioneer Center. Last year, we suffered some very bad damage due to a rain, and our roof collapsed in our kitchen. We couldn't provide meals, we couldn't do anything. We had to shut down our facility pretty much entirely. Word spreads quickly in our little community of senior center managers, and Kathy and I started talking, and she stepped up and said, you know, what can I do to help out? And we got to thinking, and with some coordination with Clackamas County, they stepped up, prepared meals for our homebound clients, and just, you know, welcomed our staff and our clients up there for congregate lunches and just activities. And I just want to say thank you very, very much to Kathy Wiseman, the Senior Center Manager, Pioneer Center Manager. Great staff. Never had a problem, never had an issue, never had a, oh, we can't do that, or we don't want to do that. It's, yeah, we can do that. Let's do it, you know. So I just want to take a moment and say thank you, and present you, sir, Mayor, with a letter from the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
You should give the cake. How much did that cost you, Wiseman?
Oh, jeez.
Moving on.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilhite and Mr. McEnroe.
Good evening. I want to apologize for being, a month ago I came before you and I haven't been back since. I had pneumonia, so I'm now catching up. Today, I just watched the April 3rd commission meeting. Had I been well, I would have been here to talk about what Mr. Lewis and Dana Webb talked about. I'm here as a citizen of Oregon City, not representing the neighborhood. Our official statement will be forthcoming. Angela, who is our secretary, and I met with John Lewis and Dana Webb yesterday, so we, had a good discussion. But some of the things that Mr. Lewis said at the last commission meeting disturbed me, and I wanted to just make sure I clarified some of his statements. Again, he said that he had reached out to us in an email. That email was gaslighting. It was attacking me and how I came to this supposed neighborhood open house, which was completely untrue. The statements that he made about everything was back on us, like it was all us. And here at the commission meeting, when he said we were surprised about the First Street signal, but yet it had been on the agenda or had been on their map. Yeah, it was on the map when Dana came in January and to our neighborhood, and she clearly said, but we don't think that's gonna happen, we're gonna do a study. So we were waiting to hear. So yes, we were surprised when it came forward that it was going to happen, and they made it sound like all along we should have known that. That wasn't the case. As far as, they talked about these activated pedestrian crossings that they wanted to put. We have been working with Public Works since January of 2016 with concerns at Garden Meadows and Chardias. Those are the two main roads that come out onto Malala Avenue from the Gaffney Lane neighborhood, and they're used as access points for the adjacent neighborhoods too. In fact, if you Google how to get to somewhere in the Gaffney Lane neighborhood, most of the time it takes you down Chardias to get to Malala Avenue. It's well-traveled. There's a lot of students. My daughter goes to Clackamas Community College, and I drive that now that we're sharing a vehicle. I take her to school or she walks. That's the way she goes. That's the way a lot of people go. This grant is supposed to be about pedestrians, and it's supposed to be about bicycles. So they talk about putting in a traffic light at First Street, and their comment was that, well, then a activated signal at Garden Meadows would be too close. Well, I beg to differ. If you go out and see the light at Washington Street and the pedestrian activated at the fire station, I don't see what the problem is. They fully admitted that there's no way to put crosswalks as close together as Metro would like to see. They told us this was yesterday at our meeting. So we already know there's not enough crosswalks, but we do know that the way people travel is they come down the road and they want to get across Malala. And so we are still working with that. And like I said, since 2016, we have been working with them. In this letter, he also talked about the fact that Martin,
Amy?
sorry, I'll go first. I'll go real quick.
You're out of time.
Okay. He said that Martin had no right to talk to us, but we have in our minutes where he came officially representing them. So we got some work to do. We had a good conversation. I just wanted to make sure you knew it wasn't as nice as he was painting it to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McEnroth?
Henry McEnroth at 912 Fifth Street in Oregon City. I'm here to say that I would like to see the city recognize that the Lebanese fig tree next to Eddie Alec's house in Tots Park be recognized as it's a commendation on his service to the city and his reign as a commissioner here. So that's,
So did he plant the tree?
he planted the tree many years ago.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Ziegler, are you,
I am here for other things other than.
okay, come on up.
Great, thank you, Mayor Holliday. My name is Kent Ziegler, and I'm here to wear a few different hats tonight. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you that were able to attend our Oregon City Business Alliance Forum presentation last month on the homeless situation. We had over 80 people that participated in that discussion, and as president of the Business Alliance, I'm really excited about that. So start out with that. The second thing, I also serve on the executive committee and on the board of directors for what was in today's Oregon City News that many of you may have read. And I had a chance to talk with many of you last Wednesday when we had our kickoff event for the Willamette Falls redevelopment, where we announced 2 grants, 2 donations. One was for $5 million, one was for $2 million. And together with what we received so far from the public, that is getting us very, very close to our goal. And we still plan to go ahead and break ground on the Riverwalk this year. We announced that OTAC will be our engineering designer on that project. And just some really exciting things. Tomorrow, I have a 10 o'clock meeting with former Mayor Norris and our executive director to go ahead and lead a tour for a company that manages a trust with over $2 billion in assets. So they attended the forum or the event last Wednesday. They were so excited about what they heard. They immediately wanted to go ahead and get up close. So it's going to be a beautiful day. So I'm glad to hear that. The other thing, kind of following up on the homelessness forum, is next Tuesday, we're doing a forum and we're anticipating close to 100 people attending. We have 90 registered so far on workforce development. And it's something that we're excited to have Oregon City Superintendent Larry Didway on our panel, Clackamas Community College President Tim Cook on our panel. And it's something that all of us at the Business Alliance and others feel so critical in lifting today's youth to be able to fill the employment opportunities for tomorrow's jobs. The last thing is I'll also serve on the state board of directors for the Home Builders Association. We'll be touching on that issue when we get into the code amendments. But I read today's paper, and on the front page, it also said, Oregon plagued by rising rent cost. Gladstone has the worst, with 35% of their households paying more than half of their income for rent. Oregon City and Milwaukee have nearly 25% of the residents severely rent burdened. And then you go on to read the rest of the article. It says 66 or 76% of cities said they lack the tools to address housing affordability. Majorities also cited lack of development-ready land. No lots ever been created in a concept plan. A lack of properly zoned land, the high cost of land, and high construction costs. And 73% said a lack of good-paying jobs also was a barrier to reducing the percentage of rent-burdened households in their cities, which we're hoping to address with next Tuesday's forum.
Kent,
Is my
you're
time
not
up?
only out of time, but you kind of sneakily snuck that into the code amendment.
No, I didn't.
Little bit.
I just read today's paper.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, Mary Holiday. Appreciate it.
All right, so no one else for citizen comment? Then we're gonna move on. See, everybody okay with the agenda? All right. Then we're gonna go to public hearings with this PC 19-035 Development Code amendments, including equitable housing, planning file LEG 18-00001. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. The purpose of the meeting tonight is to get direction on remaining 7 issues from our code amendments package. The process that I would recommend is if the commission would just move in to accept public testimony similar to last time, and then after public testimony, go through those issues one by one to provide staff direction. We will list the issues on the screen again like we did last time. Also, like we did last time, we will put the issues as they are captured in the November 26th recommendation from the Planning Commission. So the question will be to either accept Planning Commission's recommendation or change it. After this meeting, we intend to come back on May 1st with the actual draft code. And so if there are any other outstanding issues, please tell us. That may not include everything in the package. We may peel off some chunks or projects from this big project. So you may see this one big project turn out into a couple of smaller ones as well. That wasn't a joke.
Then why are we all
Also, when we come back, the record's still going to be open through May 1st, if that is the date that we do come back with those red lines. So the public will have an opportunity to do comment then as well, and then comment on the actual red line language. So that's it.
Okay, so I will open the public hearing, and do we have folks lined up to testify for public comment?
We do.
Because I don't see them on my screen.
Okay.
No. There we go. All right, so Oh, Bob's pulling that one out. Okay. Bob LaSalle and Bob LaSalle.
Does he need to change these?
No. So you get 5 minutes as a representative. I assume you're representing the Park Place neighborhood?
Yes,
And have
that's
been
right.
authorized by your executive committee to do so?
That's right, as of Monday night.
And then you get 3 minutes personally.
First, I'd like to hand out this as a part of the record, and then
So I'll take it, I'll pass it around.
Commissioner and one for Laura Tool.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Bob LaSalle, and I offer this testimony as the designated representative of the Park Place Neighborhood Association. After a developer worked hard and spent a lot of money to get a large area of the Park Place concept plan annexed and rezoned, he now wants to bypass the Planning Commission and change the plan by eliminating Chapter 17.21 in its entirety. Since he knew the rules of the game, why try to change them now? It makes no sense and effectively destroys the spirit of why the concept plan was conceived. I've given you a list of participants in the planning of the concept plan. At least 58 individuals and many organizations worked long, hard hours to put this plan together and got it approved in 2008. Some of the organizations include the City of Oregon City, Metro, David Evans and Associates, Kettleson and Associates, Clackamas County, ODOT, and many others. It's been said by the mayor in a previous meeting that the plan restricts builders to 4 or 5 architectural styles. Whether by misinformation, lack of research, or a zeal to support developers no matter what, that statement is untrue. It states in Chapter 17.21.010, quote, "The 2006 Historic Review Board's design guidelines for new construction include additional architectural descriptions," unquote. The architecture of the Park Place plan is one of the features that makes it a special place to live and not just another cookie-cutter development. Elimination of the entire chapter affects many areas such as modulation and massing, porches and entries, architectural details, siding materials, and windows. He's also stated that a few, quote, activists, as if that's a bad word, from neighborhoods at commission meetings don't represent an entire neighborhood. I'd invite all of you to attend neighborhood meetings where 60 to 80 activists are in attendance. Where are the numerous developers, as described in city correspondence, that want this chapter eliminated? I think we outnumber them. If the builders are really interested in building equitable homes, they need to get back to the basics, but they don't know how to do that. Most first-time or limited income buyers realize they can have laminate countertops instead of granite. They can have standard hinges instead of fancy Italian hidden hinges. We'll settle for more moderate floor coverings and any number of less expensive features. For the sake of all that's been put into the Park Place concept plan, we implore that you not allow the elimination of Chapter 17.21. Don't disrespect all the hard work of the people and organizations on that list that I gave you. Remember, the citizens elected you to represent them, not to represent the developers. Thank you for your strong consideration of not allowing the elimination of the Park Place concept plan piece by piece, and I offer a copy of my narration to each of you for the record.
are you done with the Park Place
I'm
neighborhood?
done with 5 minutes.
Okay,
My next one, I represent myself and some others. My name is Bob LaSalle, and I live in Oregon City. I'm presenting a charge of bias against Mayor Dan Holliday in regard to the elimination of Chapter 17.21 of the Park Place Concept Plan. On March 3rd, 2019, Mayor Holliday demonstrated his bias in favor of eliminating Chapter 17.21. He stated, quote, "What we're doing is adding more cost and making houses harder to sell," which is an opinion put forth by the developers and not based on demonstrated fact. He further stated, quote, "What you're going to get is whole streets of the same houses," unquote. Again, an opinion based on personal bias and not fact. As I stated before, proposed architectural designs offer a great variance of housing types. In addition, his disparaging reference to a small group of, quote, "activists," in his words, participating in meetings shows a bias toward public testimony and participation from the public during city meetings. His whole attitude showed an unwillingness to listen to other arguments and an obvious attempt to force his opinion on the other commissioners to eliminate that chapter before public testimony is offered. Before public testimony is offered. If he cannot have an open mind before all arguments are presented, he should not participate in the discussions or decisions on this matter. And I also offer this statement as part of the record.
okay, thanks, sir. Now we're Michael Robinson and Don Hanson. Mr. Robinson?
I'm going to let Mr. Hanson go first, if I may.
Okay.
I'll begin, Mayor. Don Hanson, a principal with OTAC. I'm here on behalf of Icon Development. And we're working with them designing 90 acres on the northern portion of the Park Place plan area between Redland Road up to Holcomb. So that's my task. First, I step back and I think, I grew up in Clackamas. I've been around Oregon City forever. I step back and I think about the geography of Oregon City. It's really a city of hills and deeply cut drainage ravines when you look at the mapping for it. And it's interesting when you look at elevations. Between Clackamas Park up to City Hall is over 100 feet. The high point in the city is 530 feet. So there's really a 509-foot vertical foot change, which I'm very tuned into because I'm designing streets. Park Place, the project we're working on, that geography, very similar. We have 3 deeply cut drainages that define the development areas on the site. And our low point is at Redland Road at elevation 70. The high point at Holcomb is 500. So there's a 430-foot vertical change up through that site. So, what does that mean? That means, that the development areas are framed by the drainage ravines, and that most of the development area that I'm looking at has slopes between 10 and 15%. So that equates to a story to a story and a half change from the front to the back of a lot, or vice versa, down or up. So, that we're very challenged by that. We looked to the Park Place concept plan carefully, and some friends of mine put that together and did a great job with it, I think. And it really gave us good guidance for development and implementation in our final design work. It did not dictate alley access garages. So I want to comment on item 2, which is on your list, which is not up there yet. First, alleys and concept plan areas. Alley lots cost more. I did a very simple cost estimate I had our engineers do that looked at the cost differential between site development for alleys versus front load lots, 29% increase. And that's basically just assuming a double loaded street and a double loaded alley and how much are half of those improvement costs. It didn't include any site grading or excavation. I was just looking at the delta of costs between the two approaches. Alleys take more space and they don't adapt well to slopes. Having garages a story to a story and a half above or below a house is an issue for accessibility. It's difficult to do good floor plans. Privacy is greatly diminished. I know that, in medium densities expanding up to R5 to do alleys. There's increased grading, pavement, and site impact. I live in a historic neighborhood in Mount Tabor. It doesn't have any alleys, and it has topography. A real good approach there are recessed garages, not side entry garages, recessed garages.
You're out of time, sir.
I am already?
You are.
That's okay. I was building to a crescendo, but maybe I'll have an opportunity to talk about that later.
Mr. Robinson.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Holliday, members of the City Commission. My name is Michael Robinson. I'm a land use attorney with the firm of Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt. My mailing address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland 97204. Like Don, I'm here tonight on behalf of Icon Construction and Development to ask that the City Commission delete the requirements for alleys in Park Place concept plan. Now, you've heard a number of folks testify to you in several hearings who build Oregon City's new homes, that alleys are difficult to accommodate, and Icon has specifically told you that developing alleys in Park Place will be both difficult and costly because, as Don just said, it's topographically challenging. What this means for the city's legislative body, the City Commission, is that the assumptions and goals for housing in Park Place may not be achieved. In other words, if you have to construct with alleys, as the city's position is today, it's going to be difficult to do so, and it's going to make housing less affordable, and Don gave some other examples of the things that may not be able to be achieved. The solution, if the City Commission is concerned about this and believes this testimony, is to re-examine requiring alleys in the Park Place concept plan. You're already addressing alleys in your legislative program. You certainly have the ability to do so. To be in compliance with Metro Code and state law, all you need to do is give a new notice to the state, and you can easily do that. And that's what Icon asked that the City Commission do, that you schedule a hearing expressly to look at the idea of deleting the alley requirements in Park Place concept plan. You can easily do that. You're entitled to do it. And by agreeing to look at this issue, you'll assure yourselves, the builders, and the public that either alleys are warranted and they can be done in a way that doesn't undercut the Goal 10 assumptions, or if they're not, you have a chance to amend the code. And that's Icon's request, and we appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks, sir. Mike Mitchell and Vahid Brown.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Mike Mitchell. I'm an Oregon City resident, and to be clear, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not on behalf of the Planning Commission. First, on the concept plan areas, I've said this before, but I don't think you can take out the items that make those plans less garage-centric, more pedestrian-friendly, without replacing them with something different. Otherwise, you don't have a concept. My suggestion would be reopen the study groups and start by re-recruiting as many people as you possibly can who were a part of creating those plans 10 years ago or whatever it was, and take another run at it. Because I agree with the concept, but I think it's not done necessarily the way we might want to do it today if we were to look at it again. So that would be my suggestion. I'm not going to talk about food carts and shelters because I suspect those are probably headed back to the Planning Commission. In fact, I would encourage you to send them back to the Planning Commission because I don't think they got the public input that they deserve because they were rolled into a much larger package of equitable housing discussions.
Your psychic abilities are phenomenal.
ADU off-street parking, and I hope I'm quoting or recalling her comment correctly, but I believe Commissioner Ide, before she resigned, suggested having that off-street parking requirement for ADUs if on-street parking was not available on the adjacent street. And Commissioner O'Donnell, I understand your concern about the safety of that, but if the parking is already allowed on the street, I don't think one more car is going to cause a huge problem. And what I'm concerned about, if there's not already off-street parking, it's probably because the lot is not wide enough. So now you could very easily have people tearing up landscape in their front yard and putting a parking space in front of the house. And to me, that's more detrimental to a neighborhood than one more car on the street. Finally, I want to talk about lot size averaging. You knew that was coming, right?
No, totally surprised.
I agree that we need the 25% cap on the number of lots that can be undersized, but I think we need to maintain the 20% maximum reduction and not go down to 10%, because we do have to realize that we're dealing with the weird dirt now in Oregon City. And in a lot of cases, they need that flexibility just to get the right number of lots in there. The last thing I'd say about lot size averaging, I don't think we should allow it. I think we should require it, or at least incentivize it. If you look in the dictionary, if you look up the definition of boring, there's a picture of an R6 subdivision. House after house after house, all the same size lots. Let's incentivize or require 25% of the lots to be 20% undersized and 20% of the lots to be 20% oversized. This equitable housing, another thing to call that is diverse housing. And when we're doing these subdivisions, let's make the houses within that subdivision have a chance to be more diverse, appeal to more people.
You're out of time.
I'm out of time. I got to almost to my picture.
All right, thank you. Fahid?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners. My name is Vahid Brown. I'm the Housing Policy Coordinator for Health, Housing, and Human Services at Clackamas County. As part of that role, I coordinate our warming shelter response, and I just am here to provide the commissioners tonight with some information about a subset of shelter, which I believe is part of one of the draft ordinances or the draft amendments. It relates to shelter, so I wanted to sort of give some context for warming shelter, a subset of shelter, and how it functions in Oregon City within our larger portfolio of warming shelters. Every year, Clackamas County contracts with providers throughout the community to provide warming shelter. We do so on nights when the temperature overnight at the wind chill temperature it's 33 degrees or below. It's a life-saving emergency intervention. We do this for the many, many hundreds of individuals in Clackamas County who don't have a warm place to sleep. That's upwards of 900 people right now, according to the numbers I'm looking at from our statistics from warming shelter this year. This year, we saw a dramatic increase in the utilization of warming shelter over last year, a 111% increase, so more than double the number of people sought warming shelter in our shelters this year over last year. We've seen that trend going in that direction. So we are continuing to reach out to community partners to provide warming shelter. This year, 9,268 bed nights were provided. That's a night that a mat or a bed in a warming shelter was occupied by a person seeking shelter. Again, that's more than double last year's, which was 4,380 bed nights. Of our total bed nights throughout our 5 shelter system, 2 of the shelters are in Oregon City, and they provided 41% of those bed night shelters this year. So Oregon City has a major contribution to our system with the 2 providers, the One by One Church and the Father's Heart. Our other 3 sites are one in Molalla, the Molalla Warming Center, and 2 in North Clackamas, Clackamas Service Center, and a church that supports the Service Center. Last year, when we had 4,380 overall bed nights, the total number of bed nights which were provided by Oregon City shelters was 57%. That was larger because one of our main warming shelters was closed due to a fire. So in the year before, the winter before this winter, over half of our warming shelter bed nights were provided by Oregon City shelters. We've luckily did not see anyone die from the cold this year in the winter. We expanded our capacity. Last year, one resident of the county did die during the winter, Rachel Renee Edwards, who passed away in a tent fire in Oregon City. But we continue to be committed to providing life-saving shelter throughout the county as it's needed. And just wanted to provide the commissioners with some information about how Oregon City fits into that system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Heiner and Patty Clark. Oh, okay, sorry. Took me a while.
Go ahead, Tony.
Tony Heiner, I reside in Beaver Creek, Oregon. Thank you for having me and allowing me a moment to speak. I'm just going to be a voice of experience. I'm out there on the ground, being the hands and feet, speaking with the houseless community. I know many people that are students at multiple colleges. I know folks that are employed. I know folks that are houseless. I engage all of these folks, many of which use both one-by-one services and the Father's Heart services. I believe that it's pertinent. To back up just a moment, I have been houseless in the past, and there's a variety of reasons for that. The services that are provided by both of the places, One by One and the Father's Heart, are very pertinent to success. There are people that it's a destination. They would be lost without it. It's just, I can't even really explain the impact that these two places, I know that Clackamas Service Center does big work. There's other places that do big work, but right here in Oregon City, I've engaged both venues, and they're significant in the moving forward of the houseless situation. I have been briefly involved in other pieces of the houseless situation in this county, in Oregon City proper. And it's, there's no solution currently. Everything's being worked on. Nobody really has answers. And, these pieces that are in place, thanks to the Father's Heart and One by One, are very important to the success of things moving forward. There's no treading water. We're either moving forward or moving backwards. And without these two places being able to operate in the capacity that they are, if not a larger capacity, this would definitely backpedal things that have come so far in my experience. As many of you probably are aware, they are nonprofit organizations. They work on, donations. There's not a lot of money there to be putting out for things. As it is, they struggle many times to be there for people. And so I'm just here to plead that you guys take this into consideration, and please just be mindful of the impact that more funding requirements would have in the success of the growth that has already taken place. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Patty Clark. I'm an Oregon City resident and homeowner for the past 15 years. And I'd like to thank you for letting me share some of my insight as a volunteer at the Father's Heart Street Ministry. I've volunteered 1 day a week for the past 4 years at this facility. And you might know that the Father's Heart is open Tuesday through Friday from 8:30 to 3. And they provide a breakfast and a hot lunch on those days. And some of the clients get a mat on the floor. We're talking about bedding. I don't know if any of the commissions have actually toured the facility, but I'd like to let you know that the bed you're talking about is actually just a pretty thin mat that's on the floor with one small blanket. And it is not a bed in short-term or transitional housing. The clients there are required to keep all their belongings with them while they're at the facility. There is no place to leave them. In my volunteer position, I mainly work at the front desk, which I answer the phone a lot of the times. And I'd like to share, a couple of months ago, I took a call from a young mother of 2 young children. She was telling me that her and her children were gonna have to be out of their home by the next week. And she had our name and phone number as somebody to ask for help. She didn't know where she was gonna be that next week with her children. I had to tell her that we do not provide shelter, that we are only a day service, except for the emergency warming shelter, which is open in only freezing conditions. Over the years, I've taken many calls like this, and it is hard. It's hard to tell these people that I'm sorry, we don't have the housing that you need for this. I tell them to call 211. I give them all my Clackamas County numbers I have. This young mother said, I've called them all. I'm on the list for all of them. And your definition of shelters that I have read, I've heard there's several of them now, but your definition, I would just say that our clients know that the Father's Heart Street Ministry is not a shelter where they can stay, but it is a place that they can come for a few hours, a few days a week, for a little bit of help and a little bit of hope. So I hope you will take that in consideration in your definition and your coding for the Father's Heart Street Ministry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Robin Schmidt and Commissioner Ide.
Hi, my name is Robin Schmidt. I'm the director of the Father's Heart Street Ministry. I was here about a month ago. And I had invited all of you to come and tour on the Father's Heart. Was disappointed because I didn't have the opportunity to show any of you firsthand what we provide. But I was hoping that you would visit before voting on the wording of the proposed codes, so you would see quite quickly they were not a shelter, but a day center that has every square inch of its facility purposed for serving. I would also want to make it clear that we have no desire at the Father's Heart to become a shelter. We want to stay a day center that connects people to their needed services and resources and provide those services with the same dignity and compassion we would want shown towards us. Tonight, I also wanted to draw your attention to 2 points regarding the operation of the Father's Heart Day Center and the Emergency Father's Heart Warming Shelter that you might not be aware of. Both of our operations have guidelines in place with regards to surrounding businesses and housed neighbors. We go over these guidelines daily and supply handouts with these same guidelines to ensure that people understand that we not only require respect on our property, but around our property as well. Today, as an example, I announced at lunchtime that I saw some new faces and I wanted them to know that they were welcome to eat with us and be at the Father's Heart, but there were some things they needed to know about us. The Father's Heart focuses its services on those that are from Clackamas County. Our showers, backpacks, clothing exchange, mailing address are limited to those that can prove living in this area. All are welcome to eat with us and take a break, but our resources and services are for those from this immediate area. Number 2, the peace and safety that you're enjoying comes from compliance to our guidelines. So respect our staff, respect our volunteers, respect each other, respect our neighbors, and respect the laws of Oregon. And here's how we respect our neighbors. I explained the public park across the street is off limits. The alley or standing out on the sidewalk is off limits. Camping or loitering in the wooded area near the Abernathy Chapel is off limits. Loitering across the street or at local businesses is off limits. If you're found in these areas, you could lose your services at Father's Heart. The other point of operations that I wanted to bring to your attention is that the Father's Heart does not have a large corporate sponsor. Our financial donations from neighbors, community groups, and churches. And these donations are what pay our utilities, liability insurance, fuel and insurance for our van, our increasing monthly lease, and maintenance expenses. Our day center operates with 67 service volunteer positions weekly and 3 minimal paid staff. A $5,000 fee for a conditional use permit is a great burden for us to pay. We hope that you'll waive this fee so that we will be able to continue a much needed service to our community. We urge you to make a distinction between day centers, cooling centers, emergency warming shelters. They are not the same in the services they provide.
Ma'am, you're out of time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Commissioner Hyde.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Nancy Ide. I am a resident of Oregon City, as well as I'm here today on behalf of the Steering Committee of the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Clackamas County. They are a team of 20 local volunteer professionals whose vision is to bring together community partners to find solutions to homelessness in Clackamas County. The coalition submitted a letter to you on March 20th of this year regarding our concern that the proposed shelter code amendment, as written, may result in eliminating the currently operating day center and emergency warming centers in Oregon City. The proposed code amendment on shelters requires a conditional use to operate and are limited to certain zone districts. I want you to know that the coalition is supportive of the conditional use requirement for shelters that provide transitional housing to individuals on a short-term basis. However, the purpose and use of day shelters, or more appropriately named day centers, and the emergency warming and cooling centers is dissimilar from that of a housing shelter. The Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, otherwise known as HUD, provides 2 definitions, one for transitional housing and another for emergency shelter, each with different requirements. The day and warming centers do not provide short-term housing, but rather provide daytime relief services to homeless individuals and life-saving overnight lodging on a temporary emergency basis during extreme weather events. We suggest that a separate definition be created for day centers and emergency centers, and that these operations be permitted in certain zone districts without a conditional use. The coalition also encourages the development of an agreement between the centers and the surrounding neighborhoods to address any concerns. So after hearing from the public on these concerns, if the City Commission decides to proceed with the proposed shelter code as is written, we respectfully request grandfathering in the Father's Heart Street Ministry Day Center, which has been operating successfully for the past 6 years at 603 12th Street, and the 2 warming centers that have been successfully operating during the previous 2 winter seasons, one at the Father's Heart and the other at the office facility for One by One Church at 1512 Washington Street. If these 2 warming centers cannot be grandfathered due to their status of operation under an emergency resolution, then we request the conditional use and fee be waived for these 2 sites based on the history of their successful operation and the life-saving service that they've been to our community's homeless population. Thank you for listening to our requests, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you.
Thank you. I actually want to correct something. I have been to the Father's Heart.
Thank you.
I may not have been there with you.
Okay.
But I toured it.
Thank
And
you.
unless the mission has changed in the last 2 years, I still understand it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
So we have Jack Schumate and Micaiah Smith.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Michaela Smith, and I work at 1500 Division Street.
Sorry, they misspelled it on my
Sorry about
machine.
that. That's all right. It happens commonly. So my comments will be brief, but I assure you they're sincere. Again, my name is Michaela Smith, and I am an outreach worker at the Providence Willamette Falls Emergency Department. Prior to working for Providence, I worked for 6 years providing direct service to unhoused individuals at the Clackamas Service Center. As a provider within the healthcare system, I can absolutely attest that we could not do the work that we do without our community organizations to support our patients after they leave our hospital. During these past winter months, I was able to breathe a sigh of relief when discharging our unhoused patients because I knew they would be able to seek shelter at our Father's Heart or One by One emergency warming shelters on our bitterly cold nights. Our hospital and Oregon City warming shelters are very much both in the same business of saving lives. Having had worked at a small nonprofit for 6 years, I know firsthand that structural challenges, such as zoning and code, can throw a huge wrench into operations. Often these organizations are running at full steam just to meet the basic needs of their community, and it can be a huge challenge to redirect resources to navigate systems necessary to permit programs such as these warming shelters. I'm incredibly grateful to the work that you, our city commissioners, are doing in considering these code amendments, which might ease the process for implementing these life-saving shelters. As a service provider within the Providence system, I fully support code changes that help remove these barriers, Thank you so much for your time, consideration, and your service.
Thank you. Jack?
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners, and my name is Jack Schumate. I'm actually the pastor of One by One Church, and I also sit on the Coalition Steering Committee meeting. And I just want to, first of all, say thank you for allowing us to operate, waiving some of the codes so we could operate and have an emergency center, which allowed us the ability to get people off the streets, and you heard the numbers. For us, we're not a shelter, we're a church, but part of our mission in the city of Oregon City is to come alongside and help not just have church on Sunday, but help have some solutions for some of the issues that the city faces. And one of those is emergency housing. And what you're seeing is some pictures of, it's not just the houseless and the homeless that we're working with, but there are about 250 volunteers who really have a heart, and this is a banquet that we were thanking all the volunteers that were there night after night serving and giving up their warm beds to be there so people could sleep. So it involves our city, it involves a lot of people in the county that really have a heart to just see people better their lives. And, our goal is getting people off the streets and healthy and into affordable housing. But there's the emergency before that can happen. And I will tell you, as a pastor working with volunteers and in a nonprofit, the fee will impact us. And it will impact the city because they're not gonna go away. And so what has happened is we've been able to provide some safe places for them to sleep. And there are rules, as you heard, and guidelines. So I just wanted to share that this change will have an impact if it happens. And we're actually seeing, as you heard Vahid share, we're seeing a lot of growth in homelessness, and it's just going to increase. So we really need to look at how can we create some more places for homeless within our city as it grows, and come up with some solutions on how we can have some affordable housing and get them off the streets. But if we are impacted by a fee, that's going to slow us down. So I just wanted to share that, and also thank you for working with us, because you have been working with us. But this potential code could cause some shutdown and eventually affect us from the ability to really help people when they need it the most. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Roseanne Johnson and Lisa Novak.
Good evening, my name is Roseanne Johnson. I represent the Home Builders Association for Portland Metropolitan. Mayor Holliday, commissioners, the HBA represents over 1,400 companies and tens of thousands of men and women who work in the residential, building, and remodeling industries throughout Greater Portland. We work to promote housing affordability and are dedicated to maximizing housing choices for all who reside in the region. Now, I'm going to jump straight into the proposed code amendments that are starkly oppositional to the equitable housing goals that came out of the Metro grant in late 2016, early 2017. So I'll start with the lot averaging, otherwise known as lot size reduction. We urge the commission to maintain the current standards for lot averaging found in chapter 16.08.065. The proposal to reduce the use of lot averaging and restrict it will in fact decrease the number of available buildable lots. And this will lead to increased land prices spread across fewer, larger lots, which in turn lead to larger, more expensive homes. Economies of scale is also a critical factor in housing affordability, specifically as it relates to lot averaging. Restrictive lot averaging denies subdivisions of the economic benefits associated with producing each additional housing unit. So when construction occurs, the soft development and overhead costs such as feasibility studies, site surveys, transportation, and site supervision are all allocated among the number of units being constructed. The fewer the units, the more each home pays for its share of those costs. So this proposed restriction to lot averaging arbitrarily and unnecessarily thwarts economies of scale and drives up costs while contradicting efficient land use planning. Maintaining the current code for lot averaging will allow for a range of lot sizes and a diverse selection of housing sizes and prices throughout the city. Secondly, we urge the commission to eliminate the alley requirements, like you've heard earlier, in the concept plan areas. We support the city in removing them in other areas of the city, and also urge the commission to apply those same standards in the concept plan areas. Soft costs associated, as well as hard costs like surfacing, labor and materials, enhanced stormwater management facilities, short and long-term maintenance, they all increase development and construction prices by tens of thousands of dollars for each housing unit. So these increased costs fall far short of the proposed code amendments goals of promoting housing affordability throughout the city. Next, we urge the commission to remove the historic architecture requirements for the Park Place concept plan area. Notably, the requirement for detached side entry and rear entry garages. And I know that I'm out of time, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Good evening, Mayor Holliday and Oregon City Commissioners. Currently, I'll be brief, Oregon City is currently in the process of revising the municipal code. Within this process is the proposal to eliminate certain sections relating to the architectural design standards for the Park Place and South End concept plans. It appears that these proposed changes are being implemented to satisfy Metro's Equitable Housing Initiative, which is geared to provide affordable housing. The net result of this will be an increase in the density of the Portland metropolitan area. Oregon City is now on a course to change the Park Place and South End concept plan, zoning and architectural designs to achieve the affordable housing goal. The question comes to mind as to affordable and to whom? The Metro website shows various levels of income and what they can afford for housing costs. Will the changes that the developers are asking for in the Oregon City Code fit the Metro scenario and still maintain quality of life that Oregon City presently has? A plan is just that, and a plan is always subject to change. In my opinion, it would be premature to make extreme changes to the already agreed upon Park Place concept plan. All of this begs a question. Why is the concept plan being examined at this time? Why are developers questioning what the community, architects, taxpayers, and city and staff have already approved? The Park Place concept plan was approved after much consideration, and comments from developers could potentially be put forward in the future during the master planning phase, but not for an already approved concept plan. When more information becomes available, such as the effect on the current infill projects in Park Place, a better analysis should be performed while the master planning is underway. At this juncture, I see no reason to rush through a code change when there is no solid master plan. Respectfully, Lisa Novak, Oregon City.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
So Kent Ziegler and Elizabeth Grazier Lindsay.
Elizabeth, let you go first.
I need to start with a question. I looked at the agenda, but I didn't see these topics, and I'm wondering how I missed out what everyone else saw. I saw that we're doing the code amendments.
I think it's actually on the city's website, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Somewhere deep inside.
listed on the agenda for tonight is the code amendments, and these are all just parts of that code amendment package.
It would be helpful if somebody let me know when the issues I'm interested in come up, because they actually aren't relevant tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have your time?
No.
Sure.
No.
Wait,
It's like lopsided.
she wants to comment, let's let her comment about the things she wishes to testify about tonight since.
Oh, I wasn't telling you she couldn't. She didn't want
I'd be happy to testify, but they might be premature and coming up at a later meeting.
State your name for the record and go ahead.
Okay, my name's Elizabeth Gracer Lindsay. I'm in Beaver Creek, and I had a bunch of things that I thought should be corrected in the code. There's high-density uses and three-story buildings that should be only permitted in the central city and not on the urban rural fringe. We should have buffering that happens between the city and the rural areas, and the roads that lead out of the city can't handle the traffic volumes. There's your live, work, home occupation types of code, and we should have other code that allows the full range of jobs. This needs to be planned more thoroughly and determine what parts of the city it's compatible with, but it's especially important in the Beaver Creek Road concept plan area, which was brought into the city to be industrial land, and that need for family wage jobs remains in the city. The city still has a very low job to housing ratio and poor finances that result from that. This lack of family wage jobs also makes the city a bedroom city with excess commuting. which is quite a problem when we have so many roads over capacity even before the planned growth occurs. So we need to have more jobs in the city, and that happens partly by having more looking at the home occupation jobs. The city code needs to have it required that planning, that areas are planned and that there's assurance that there's adequate infrastructure before annexations happen. The accessory dwelling units are not happening at 100%. They're happening at a low level right now. And 100% build out of accessory dwelling units should not be used to grandfathered in approved traffic volumes like happened at the intersection of Beaver Creek Road and Highway 213. Parallel parking should not happen immediately adjacent to major arterials because of how that impacts the traffic flow. Major arterials should not be exempted from following the city's code, such as having 4 lanes, especially when the traffic volumes require more capacity. Planning should not allow ridiculously optimistic traffic generation estimates based on unproved assumptions, as happened for the Beaver Creek Road concept plan. And there also should be some provisions that force jobs to occur before residences occur so that the development actually benefits the city. And there's a few more.
Thank you. Mr. Ziegler?
Okay, Mayor Holliday, commissioners, I appreciate the time. I'm actually going to be speaking on some comments that Nick Vorosky had submitted into the written record. He's a small business owner in downtown Oregon City and has created neighborhoods for workforce housing. And specifically, it deals with the alleyway and the concept plan areas and the residential design standards. And some of his comments are the livability, and I'm not going to read his entire letter, just highlights. Alleys force garages into what otherwise would be backyards. Think of all the things you use your backyards for that you would not be able to. Fun with your kids and family, a safe place for your young children to get outside and play. Gatherings with friends for backyard barbecues and events. Gardening, raising vegetables. Home buyers for whom these activities are important will simply not purchase a home with a small backyard. Affordability. Alley-loaded housing requires, in addition to the cost of asphalt and rock and the equipment and labor to put it in place, additional storm drainage capacities for the impervious surfaces. In essence, you're creating an entire additional street just to serve garages. With those additional stormwater detention facilities, you have to have more underground pipes. It consumes more land. That requires more grading to go ahead and detain the water for 100-year storms. And all those costs add up and reduce the potential for development, produce revenue, thus prices have to be raised. In addition to the housing, his comment is the job of the builders in their communities adapt their product styles to consumers' changing needs. And it's really not the role of cities or any municipality to dictate what type of housing people will live. The consumer will dictate that. And I get back to the newspaper article and close on that. Among other things in this survey that put Gladstone and Oregon City and Milwaukee at the top of the list of being severely rent burdened, they said the survey found that most cities, 70%, consider housing affordability as more or much more important than other issues facing them. Even more, 78% affordability is equally a problem in both the rental and home ownership markets. And their closing paragraph said, despite recognizing this problem, relatively few cities have done anything to solve it. And so I agree with Mike Mitchell's comments that what might be prudent is for the city commission to go ahead and send these code amendments that deal with alleyways, historical design standards, and other components of that back to the planning commission for further review, further citizen involvement and engagement. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Can I ask him a question?
Sure.
So I believe you represent some developers, correct?
I used to own land, but no, I don't represent any. I don't work for any developers. I am not represented by or representing those. I do serve on the board of directors for the Homebuilders Association, though.
So if our housing needs analysis comes back and says that we need more affordable housing that are smaller houses that aren't 3,000 square foot homes, do you think you have some developers lined up that would step up and build a smaller house versus dictating just what the market is saying if they think they can sell a 3,000 square foot house? It seems to be the market. You said that the market is driving it, but unfortunately, we are faced with policy decisions because we need houses that are not being built by developers. So we are kind of in a crossroads.
Sure. And I have an answer for that question, if I can respond to it.
Sure.
It's an excellent question, and I think it's very appropriate in today's marketplace where Metro puts forth a $650 million bond measure for affordable housing. You're asking, will developers step up and build a smaller home as compared to a 3,000 square foot home?
Yeah.
My question to you is, if the cost of the lot goes up by 30, 40, or 50% because of all these additional costs to create and finish that lot, how can they afford to now put a smaller house on that and generate any revenue whatsoever? It's not possible.
So you're saying it's because they don't ever pencil.
That would not pencil. No bank would make a loan on it, and most businesses that I've found stay alive and thrive because they actually generate profits. And in that particular scenario, if you increase the cost, they will not make a profit, and it won't be built, and it'll just sit there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, last two, Tom Guile and Mr. Gifford. Mr. Guile, go ahead.
Hi, Tom Guile, Oregon City resident. Just before I get into my main comments, I really urge you to adopt the lot averaging codes approved twice by your planning commissioners by a vote of at least 4-2. Look at the tapes of all the discussions we had. Just wanted to talk about, obviously, the design standards. After 3 unsuccessful attempts over 6 years to get the voters to approve the Park Place annexation using every promo, or as we called it at the time, trick and pony shows he could muster, Kent Ziegler finally got this Park Place concept plan annexation approved only because our citizens didn't have the right to vote. There was some pretty intense lobbying of the governor by developers, lobbyists to sign a bill to take away the rights of the citizens to vote on annexations. That vote still to this day is enshrined in our own city charter. Only now does Mr. Ziegler come before you, supposedly representing someone else's comments, to ask you to change a concept plan that he was involved in over 11 years ago, back in 2008. Mr. Ziegler was not only a part of that year-long process, he even owned the property. And if he's not involved with the developers, I don't understand why a few years ago, he was bringing checks by people to the neighbors on Holcomb Boulevard, offering them to not be annexed in or not to fight the annexation. If that's not representing the developers, I don't know what is. Anyway, we call that bait and switch tactics where I come from. However, if you should decide to call for a review of the Park Place concept plan from 11 years ago, we have a request. Many of you were not there at the time, but many of us were. We spent countless hours. We were informed at that time that the area behind our Trailview areas and the other ones would be annexed in as FU10. We were told that the planned development would stair-step down from R10s behind our R10 lots down to R865 medium density in the center of the concept area. At a recent Park Place neighborhood meeting, Kelly Reed informed us that the properties were medium density or R5. I immediately came that evening to Laura Turway to ask her about that switch. She confirmed that indeed the area was brought in as medium density when it was approved. The change was not noticed by those of us who spent the time on that plan and were told it would be R10s. Tonight, somebody brought me an attachment here that's on your agenda, attachment B9, little b. It says final concept plan, page 8 of 93, shows yellow, which is low to medium density around that area. Orange is the medium to high density, and that's further away from that area. So if you look at that map, it says page 8 of 93, it was supposed to be low density around the Trailview in that area up there. So let's see how much time. Oh, good. I'm almost close. I think that's about it, but the main thing I wanted to say was, again, Ken Ziegler was a part of all that. He was there through all the meetings. He owned the property. Why didn't he ask for this before now? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gifford.
Enjoy.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. I was not going to testify this evening.
You just couldn't help yourself.
I just couldn't help myself. Couldn't help myself. Because once again, I'll mention his name, Mike Mitchell, came up with another idea. I guess so. What you're considering tonight, let me state the obvious, is a really big deal. This can affect Oregon City for generations yet to come. Recent survey of the greater metro area said that there were two major things that floated to the top, head and shoulders above any other issue. And those two things were the cost of housing and the homeless situation. It's really incumbent upon you as our leaders to find some solution to the housing costs. I suspect that putting restrictions on this, and I think I've mentioned before, that's the only thing that you have any control over, is the codes, is not going to make a significant difference if it's more expensive to build a place. And so back to Mr. Mitchell. I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me to suggest that you have the authority to form another commission, form another committee to study this. It's too big of a deal to just say, oh, well, we've already done that. Well, we did it, over 10 years ago. The market was a very different situation. Costs of housing was a very different situation. If you remember back in 2008 or so, it was a different world. And I think we probably need some new citizens to look at those issues and to come up with some other suggestions. And if it takes another few months to get that done, I would say it would be time well spent to get this done right. That's just my thought.
Thanks, sir. Is there anybody else that wishes to testify? Then I'm going to close the public hearing, and we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Not by me.
Yeah. Okay, we will call the meeting back to order. We have closed the public hearing, and we'll go back to the screen. So first up is residential design standards for Park Place and South End concept plan areas. We've had a bunch of testimony about this subject. I would say that prior to this code amendment process, I wasn't aware of these design standards in place, and I think it caught some folks in the development community off guard. Even though, you know, this was, parts of it were passed in 2008. As some people have testified, that was a long time ago, and the market has changed. And so it would be my suggestion that since this was not discussed at the planning commission level during the code amendment update process, that it really just came up through an organic process from developers and other folks. I would suggest that we send this back to the planning commission and let them take a stab at this thing before we try to make a wholesale decision on it.
I think I have a question maybe for Ms. Turway, or Pete.
Yeah, okay.
Is that the right action though, as far as amending or considering revision to a concept plan, going
Well,
to,
I
and
would like
one of the
to-
comments that made, hang on one second, was
sure.
about doing a formal master plan, versus just being the concept plan. So maybe you can also address that too.
I think there's been some confusion that changing these standards changes the concept plan. And I want to say that that's not the case. The concept plan is the concept plan. The standards that implement that concept plan in the zoning code are what we are talking about. So there's a couple of exhibits that we put together in your packet that talk about how the design standards are intended to implement the vision conceptually in those concept plans. And I can go into that.
Can you talk about the annexation requirement master plan?
Right, so this all starts with the requirement that the city adopt a concept plan before any land within the concept plan area is annexed to the city. And that concept plan has to meet Metro Title 11 requirements. And that principally has to do with the underlying zoning. So if you adopt comprehensive plan designations that implement a certain lot size, when that land is ultimately annexed and zoned, that will drive, you know, the majority of the housing types. And what we're really talking about in this situation are how houses look from the street, where the garages sit, and none of those things really affects whether we're in compliance or with Title 11. We are, so.
I guess I'm just not sure that that's something for the planning commission to be deciding
I
on.
think
I don't think it is.
It is
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead, yeah.
Go ahead.
I would agree with that position. What we've got is the product of a group of people, our citizens. I want to respect their deliberation. I want to respect this city and the people that live in it. And if it's to be reconsidered, and we attended the Park Place meeting, we understood what they said. Some were willing to reconsider certain aspects. Some were staunch about, we told you what we wanted back when. But this is a product of that process, and if it's going to be amended, I just sooner be amended again through that same process and updated. Not send it to the planning commission. Send it to the people, the community that generated the document in the first place.
Commissioner Smith?
I agree.
Commissioner Griffey, you have anything?
Of course I do. This is very near and dear to my heart. I took part as a planning commissioner in the South End Road concept plan. And what I feel is that the requests that we are getting are extremely premature. The concept plans are a vision. They are not driven by the market. They are not driven by the development community. They are being driven by our citizens. Our citizens have said that in the future, we want the opportunity for these particular areas to look different. How we get there, either through the standards that are in there or the alternatives which are available to anyone who might want to develop in that area in the future, is up to the citizens of this community. It is not up to outside interests. The citizens have said this is what they would like to see. I challenge the development community to think outside the regular cookie cutter box and look into the future. The things are not going to look the same. We have not had an opportunity to see whether these work. And if they don't work, you have an alternative. The code allows for an alternative. I do not support sending this back to the Planning Commission. I do not support opening up the concept plan process because I think our citizens have told us what they would like to see. And I think it's up to those who wish to develop to see how they can meet that challenge. I look at it as an opportunity. It is not a restriction. It is an opportunity to implement a vision that our citizens said that they might want to try. And that's where I think I stand on that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna take us back to the very beginning. And that is that when this great country was founded,
That's a long way back.
yeah, it is. But
Way back.
But there's a point to this, and that is that founding fathers wanted us to have a country where you could do literally as much as you could on your own without government interfering. And it wasn't until the late 1940s that there even was a, quote, development community. Prior to 1945, or prior to 1940, you bought a piece of land and you got together with your friends or your neighbors, or you hired a carpenter and you built whatever house you wanted to build. And then moving forward after the war, there was so much need for housing that's when the development community really became, a business. And it's incumbent upon us to do with the code to be about life and safety. So we need to have codes that, require the kind of structure that is built in the right way so that it isn't gonna fall down. We have electrical codes, we have plumbing codes, we have, those kinds of things. But I don't see that it's government's place to tell somebody what their house should look like. There's a huge difference between the idea of, life and safety, making setbacks, all of those kinds of things, and deciding that we're gonna legislate that you have to have a front porch, or we're gonna legislate that you have to have an alley, or that we're gonna legislate that you have to paint a house a certain color, or, all those kinds of things. I believe that it is a fundamental basic freedom that we should be able to that an individual person should be able to build the house that they want to build. Now, that house may not fit for somebody 20 years from now, but it's still the fact that I just don't see that we have the right to tell anybody, what kind of house they should build. And that's where I come down on that. So what is the,
Well, you wanted a little bit of history, so let me give you a little bit of history. For those of us that studied a little history, in 1926, there was a landmark case before the United States Supreme Court called Euclid versus Ambler Realty. Everybody that goes to law school knows that case. It established the principle and practices for local governments to have land use planning and land use zones in their communities. So,
that's
enough said.
fundamentally different
Yes.
from telling somebody what
We're
their
not.
house should look like.
We're not, Dan. We're saying that there are alternatives. It could be this, it could be this. There's lots of alternatives in the code.
That's fundamentally not the case, Commissioner McGriff.
And those alternatives exist in the Park Place concept plan.
Yes, they do.
You can go into a type 2 hearing.
Yes.
I mean, the Park Place concept plan has been misrepresented in many of the writings we got in preparation for this meeting and possibly even tonight. The Park Place concept plan provides for a mix of housing. types and densities. It provides for affordable housing into a range of incomes. It's stated right in the plan. I'm not sure some of the people in the opposition have even read this plan.
And that plan was written by the same somebody as the mayor's talking about. And those are the same somebodies that voted us to be here, so make a motion, somebody.
I guess, what is the request?
Well,
We're moving these one at a time. So is there a motion to do something with item one?
The proposal before you is what the recommendation came up through the planning commission, acknowledging that the situation came up after planning commission. But what the code says now is retain existing residential design standards for Park Place and South End concept plan areas. And so you can either support that or
I
change
move
that
to
statement.
support the recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
There are other items in this package that address the concept plan areas, like the alleys and stuff like that. So this vote at this moment is just where it stands at this moment as a chapter, treating it as a chapter that we're not making changes, but we may be coming back to it 3 items later.
This is just the residential design component. The next slide we have is the alley component.
Okay, I just want to be clear on what we're, okay.
Right.
Call roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
No. Moving on. Alice.
So this amendment would change the alley requirement so that it is applied to the concept plan areas only. Currently, alleys are required in these districts citywide.
Required.
Yes.
That's the single point of decision we're making here.
Yes, the recommendation of planning commission is to just limit it to the concept plan areas only for medium density residential and then those commercial zoning designations. So you can either retain that existing recommendation or tweak it if you'd like.
Again, there is a modification process in this section of code that allows somebody to seek an alternative.
I'd like to move that we support the recommendation of the planning commission.
Second.
I would like to put a different proposal on the table.
Okay.
Well, we've got a motion and a second, so.
Okay.
I'll withdraw my second for the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
But we need the motion in the second for the discussion.
I'll run the meeting. Thank you.
different discussion.
Commissioner Lyles Smith.
I would like to entertain the idea of just not making it a requirement citywide. Removing it from being a requirement, including the concept plan areas. Like, it's still an option, but just not be required. Is that a possibility?
I can support that.
I'm looking to you as far as legal,
However you
legal
want to
stuff.
change it, yes, we can support findings if you want to retain it in the concept plan areas only, if you want to retain it citywide, or if you want to get rid of it altogether.
I want it to be an option, not required.
Well, I want to just tell you, it's required, but there is a alternative review opportunity. So I would say it is an option now, because there is a alternative review. If you have a better solution or a reason why you can't do it now.
Exactly.
But my question is,
Right.
why is it here in the first place? Why is this good?
This has been in our code for a long time, and there are a lot of reasons for it, both urban design to have more walkable communities. Also, the zoning designations that we're talking about are higher density. It's not low density residential. It's places where if you put a lot of curb cuts, then that reduces the amount of space for on-street parking, for street trees, and other amenities as well. So it's more of an urban design to support walkable communities. And we have had this in the code for quite some time. It was in the 90s, I believe, that it was required for commercial zoning designations, and then later for the medium-density residential. And as you can see from the development that's occurred since that time, there have been a lot of applications that have used that alternate path to explain why, whether it's topography or whatever, like why that reason needs to be different. And then that goes through a public review process, so the public has opportunity to weigh in on that as well.
And once again, alleys, at least in these concept plans, are the product of those concept plans by those people, subject to going to a type 2 hearing if you feel that they don't work. So there is a resolution if you don't want that for topographical reasons or whatever. So I would be, if we need to restate the motion and second it and vote on it, I'm for that.
So is this only on our agenda because it was proposed to remove alleys specifically in the concept plan areas?
No, citywide, I think. Isn't that correct?
This came from the project advisory team originally.
Yes, the project advisory team did talk about the alley concept, and they did talk about limiting it to just the concept plan areas. And that was the staff recommendation and the recommendation of the planning commission as well. You're talking about it tonight just because it came up through the development request to remove. It's tied kind of with the residential design standards for concept plans too. So the conversation of both kind of came up in mid-January.
Rachel, there was a lot of discussion in the South End Road concept plan that they wanted to try to see some of the areas be designed with not necessarily straight streets, but that they could meander to make it more walkable, to provide some areas for, because there's a lot of wetland areas in the South End concept plan area, and they wanted to see if that could be done to minimize the amount of paving by having some maybe narrower streets with alleys in the back. So it was an idea that the concept plan committee came up with to say, let's see if we can try it. We're not saying that if it doesn't work, that you can't opt out. So it was as Frank stated, at least in South End.
The argument you just made is doesn't make any sense. Adding alleys only increases the impervious surfaces. It doesn't decrease it.
We didn't say the alleys had to be pervious. There's options that the city has. You can do pervious surfaces. So, Frank, you want to remake the motion?
You didn't withdraw your motion,
there's still
so
a motion
I
on the
will,
floor.
restate my second.
Further discussion? Call roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith.
Aye.
Oh, you need to mark it.
Oh, sorry.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
No. So moving back. We're at food carts apparently. Is that right?
That's correct. This would establish standards and a review process to allow food carts. And those would be allowed as what we call a transitory use, which is for less than 5 hours in a 24-hour period in the mixed-use employment, general industrial, and campus industrial zones. They would be prohibited in the mixed-use corridor zone, the mixed-use downtown zone, and the general commercial zone and institutional zones without a special use permit. And it also includes standards for both of those.
Did the planning commission spend much time on this?
Yes.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, so this was the recommendation coming out of the planning commission. And
Yeah. It was a part of the package since it started in early July.
So would Clackamas Community College would it be permitted at the community college now?
Not
Or
without
with
a
these standards?
special use permit. So if we were to allow it in the institutional zone as a by right, permanent, non-transitory use, that would be a
I'd like
change.
to single out Clackamas Community College and make it allowed
Yeah.
And then
at the college.
we would just need clarification from the commission if you want to allow it at in the zoning designation, that's the college, which is institutional, do you want to allow permanent food carts or just the transitory lunch carts?
Well, I think permanent food, they're talking about trying to do a food cart pod up there. I would want to make it specific to the community college campus. I wouldn't want to make it, institutional wide, because that allows, say, Clackamas County or, some other places to be able to do that.
Okay, we can call out their tax lot.
I'd agree with what the mayor said, only because the community college Saturday before has told us they don't have the facilities to feed their student body. I totally agree with your approach, Mayor.
Commissioner Smith?
Can we legally do that? Can we legally stipulate one particular, okay?
Yes, you can. I have a little hesitation
Right.
just from a policy perspective that, we don't want to zone. I know, I'm sorry.
We
You're
do
right.
have some other places in the code where we specifically call out tax lots. It's just if you want to keep doing that or not.
Well, how about subject to future review if the community college increases their capacity to feed their students? Or does that just complicate a simple issue?
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep it simple
Well,
then.
why couldn't, wait. So why couldn't we, just add the institutional zone? Because I believe all of the county properties are not zoned institutional. They're in.
Mixed use employment.
They're in mixed use employment.
You're
So-
correct.
So the county's Red Soils Complex is not an
No.
institutional zone? Okay,
No.
all right.
Correct. So it's mainly city properties and the community college.
But schools can fall
And some
under that.
schools, and some schools, yeah. So I would like to propose that we add the institutional zone and the mixed-use downtown, except the downtown design district, as a permitted use for,
What did you say?
I said the institutional zone and the mixed-use downtown, except for the downtown design district, as a transitory mobile food cart.
So the 5 hours.
The
or less.
5 hour or less in a 24-hour period.
As well as the permanent food cart pods at the college, or in institutional as well. So institutional is permanent and transitory.
Yeah, I kind of have issues with the permanent period. I'm not even sure why we're allowing them in the Willamette Falls downtown district. So to me,
It's already in there.
I know it already is. I'm not sure why it is there. But we can come, so we have two issues. We have the transitory and the non-transitory. And all until about 3 days ago, I thought the whole time we were talking about just transitory, like 5 hours or less. I didn't think we were talking about permanent food pods. And then I really dove into this and parsed it all out, and so I had to change my thoughts on it. So I'm not sure about a permanent food pod. I don't know, I'm thinking more of baby steps on this one.
So
But
like
that's just where I'm at.
exceeding the 5 hour, something that exceeds the 5 hour limit, but not permanent? How would you approach it?
Oh, I wasn't completely on board with the permanent food pods being set up anywhere. I was kind of thinking maybe we could take the transitory food cart for a spin before we started setting up actual food cart pods. but-
Yeah, I'm not in favor of the permanent food cart pod at this point in time, but the community college came to us with a specific request.
Right.
And it makes sense there because, it's a good 3/4 of a mile or a mile to get out of the college campus and get to somewhere where you can have something to eat.
Right, but they could also be served by the transitory. I mean, if they had agreements with 5 food carts that came there every day for 5 hours, not in a permanent situation. Again, when they came, I wasn't ever thinking that we were talking about permanent food cart pods. So it wasn't until 3 days ago that I was really surprised that, that's on the table.
Yeah, no, and the planning commission's proposal doesn't include any new permanent facilities. And then just to clarify, because you're talking about the difference between transitory and permanent, if you do the transitory model, we limit 3 food carts per property. So
At any
as
given
if that's the
time?
college, 3 at, yeah.
at any given time.
I got you.
They
So-
could have as many as they want.
So I'm, see, all you're talking about is adding the institutional zone, right? You're not talking about changing anything else.
And the mixed-use downtown, except the downtown design district. So the downtown design district is essentially the main street downtown, and I don't want anything there, but I would like mobile food carts less than 5 hours including the mixed-use downtown area.
Okay.
Even,
That would include OCV area, that would include out by Home Depot,
this says it's prohibited. in
the other
mixed-use
areas, the
corridors.
15th, 16th Street areas in downtown, just to have the mobile, again,
Yeah,
I wasn't
I
concerned.
understand where you're headed with that, and I'm gonna continue to have my same position, and that is that, allowing mobile food carts in that area competes directly with folks that have invested hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in their brick and mortar establishments. And you can buy a food cart for $25,000 or $30,000 and pull up, and all of a sudden you've got customers, and you're taking money out of the pockets of business owners that have, already done that. OCBA has a sausage shop, in its location. I'm not sure where this transitory food cart is actually going to work. Because the fact is we're still not gonna allow them to park in the right of way, right?
This is for off-street, so it would be if they park in a parking stall in a parking lot. or
In
something
a
like
parking
that.
stall in an off-street parking lot.
Yeah.
Correct.
But say not the city's lot, right?
right.
Could a transitory food cart park in the city's lot by the ice house and operate?
With a special use permit.
Yeah, if you allow it in mixed-use downtown, it's zone mixed-use downtown, it's also outside the overlay district, then it could, but the city would have to authorize it to do
It was
so.
just- yeah,
It
the city has
requires
to
an approval
authorize.
process.
Yeah, so all of the private property owners still have to authorize, I mean, food carts can't just pull up to Fred Meyer and start selling hot dogs. They still have to come to an agreement with the private property owner, so the institutional zone, they would still have to get approval from the city, which is unlikely, right?
No,
But you never know.
what I'm trying to ensure is that if, Joe's Hot Dog pulls into, a spot on, somewhere on Main Street, that is not legal. They have to be on either private property,
Yes, they have to be on private property and they have to go through a review process as well.
and do they have to buy a permit, do they have to buy a special use permit for every time they park?
No, it's a one-time only.
One time only per location?
The review
Yes,
process.
per location. The review process, we look at each individual location because we want to make sure that they're not taking up, that the site still meets its minimum landscaping requirements and that it meets the other standards that are required in our provisions. So for each location, we would do an over-the-counter review process. It's a type 1 site plan design review, so it's a little shy of $80 or so. And it's good forever after that. There's no expiration on the review at that location.
Okay.
I
I'm not sure where we're at here.
Nor am
I could address the brick and mortar comment. I know there are some concerns about the brick and mortar. I have a hard time buying into that argument just because if I want to go out to a nice dinner, I'm not going to a food cart. I'm going to a restaurant, a brick and mortar restaurant to sit down and, but I'd like to have the option to not spend 40 or 50 bucks to go to a food cart and have options, which is, I think, what the majority of our residents are saying. So if I want to go one place, I'm going to go to that one place. I'm not going to food carts, but this just gives me more options.
Well, my suggestion then would be that, because you have to look at this from the actual business model itself. And so, in order for a food cart to gain customers, they have to be in a specific place for a number of days in a row. All right? And so in order to make that function correctly, you really need to have a place that is more of a permanent location, because otherwise you're talking about setting, starting your truck up, loading it up, bringing it all out, you set it up for 5 hours, you tear it all down, and you take it back to wherever it came from. It doesn't make any sense from a business standpoint. That'll work in a, at a festival or something like that, but on a day-to-day basis, that isn't gonna function that way. So if you wanna have food carts, then let's pick a zone and try it for the permanent food cart place, not for a, transitory kind of thing. I just don't think you're gonna get anybody that's gonna bring a food cart to Oregon City for 5 hours at a time.
Oh, I think you would.
I think you might. I don't know that you find anybody that's gonna leave their food cart here 24 hours a day. I don't know if I see that.
Well, that's exactly what they've just done it in Happy Valley. There's numerous locations in Portland where they have a food cart pod where they actually set up water, sewer, power, all that sort of thing, and they become a destination. And I have no problem with that. I mean, there are places on Malala Avenue where, you've got an empty lot right now that technically could be a food cart pod. But it's just from a business standpoint, I don't see, unless you're gonna allow them in downtown, which I would be adamantly opposed, that's about the only place where you have enough foot traffic, to make a transitory food cart make sense.
I understand both sides of the arguments, and I understand Commissioner Lyle Smith's statement that it's a very different dining experience.
Absolutely.
To grab and go versus a sit-down enjoyable meal. So I'm not sure one is a direct competitor to the other, and I know the brick and mortar people probably feel threatened by their presence. I just feel like this conversation has drifted all over the map today.
Let's make a motion.
So I heard two things. One, allowing it in the institutional zone.
Yes.
Second part would be allowing it in the mixed-use downtown outside of the design district, which is roughly 5th to
Right past
11th.
10th.
Right past 10th. So everything north of 10th roughly. So you're getting into where OC Brewing is, in that area. And then you have this transitory versus non-transitory. So I don't know if that helps to break it down, if one of those is easier to move forward with on now, or.
So the planning commission recommendation, essentially, if we look at what their recommendation was, they established standards for both transitory and non-transitory. They prohibited it in certain zones without a special use permit. And I was essentially proposing to move a couple of those zones that they listed to the allowed group. And they were proposing to allow transitory, so less than 5 hours in a 24-hour period, in mixed-use employment, general industrial, campus industrial, and I was proposing to add institutional, so we could get Clackamas Community College and the mixed-use downtown outside of the downtown design district. And that's it. There was nothing else in here that was establishing from the planning commission recommendation, permanent, mobile food carts anywhere else in the city, correct?
Right.
They're only allowed in Willamette Falls, and I was okay with that. I just wanted to adjust the zones that from the planning commission recommendation, just to expand it just a little bit. I wasn't fully prepared to go to the permanent, but if my other commissioners are willing to go there, then.
I don't think we need to. I think if we stay with that transitional or whatever it's called, and let the community college manage who can come there when. I mean, the agreement is between them and the community college. Community college can say, on these days you come, they can even vary the schedule. Let them manage that aspect of it, and we can still keep it not permanent.
We can always circle back to this. I really feel like this is a big deal for Oregon City to allow mobile food carts and there's a lot of comments on it, so I would like to take it step by step. If the community college comes back a year from now and says, we really would like to have a permanent pod and we have plans to do that, I think we should revisit it. And if we have folks that say that.
So I've had a conversation with Chair Groner of the school board for Clackamas Community College, and they would prefer
A permanent.
to have a permanent space because they want to be able to have enough of a variety for their student body and have it be, there on a regular basis.
So we could move institutional into along with the Willamette Falls Downtown District, into the permanent.
That's what I would prefer.
Make that a motion.
I'm all right with that.
Make that a motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All right, let's see if I can make this motion. I make the motion to follow the planning commission recommendation, except for these changes, allowing transitory food carts in addition to the mixed-use employment, general industrial, campus industrial, add mixed-use downtown, except the downtown design district and the institutional zone. Additionally, allow permanent, non-transitory mobile food carts in the institutional zone in addition to Willamette Falls down. I almost got it right. You know what I mean.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Call roll, please.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. What's next?
Now we're on to the discussion about shelters. Planning Commission recommendation was to allow shelters as a conditional use in all residential zones for up to 10 beds, as a conditional use in the mixed-use corridor district, and as a conditional use in the mixed-use downtown district, except the downtown design district, and then prohibit it in all other zoning designations. And with that recommendation, we also proposing standards in the conditional use chapter for shelters, which have operational standards.
I recall at one point that, that the two tax lots where, Father Shard and the other place were singled out and said they were okay. Is that not in here anymore?
That was a recommendation from the public comment we received, but it was not included in the package sent forward from the planning commission.
Okay.
Parts of that recommendation were included as standards that are now under the conditional use section of the code.
So if you were to require conditional use for the, let's call them day shelters for lack of a better term, is that conditional use an annual event?
No, conditional use is a permanent allowance.
So it's a one-time deal?
Yes, the planning commission makes that
Because some of
decision.
these folks have been telling me that, this is $5,000 every year or whatever. So if it's a one-time thing, I don't see that as that big a deal.
So I think that we need to modify our definitions based on public comment that we've received to separate shelters from day shelters, to address the issue and the difference between cooling and warming shelters and housing shelters. And so I guess my question is, because I feel that very strongly, is that enough to say, like, I truthfully don't think this proposal is ready for prime time. I think it needs to go back to the planning commission, and I think they need to work with the Clackamas Homeless Solutions group to really work through these issues about conditional use and the different definitions for shelters versus day shelters. I just don't know that, I really think we need different definitions, and I'm not sure that we can hammer that out tonight unless you have a proposal of how to do that.
What would you, if we separate out the definitions, what are you proposing then? That the day shelters and warming shelters are permitted and the other ones are conditional?
If there's a
the
difference in
product?
name, is there a different in process?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, there would
No.
be.
There was
Yes.
a lot of discussion, both at the Equitable Housing Advisory Group and then through the Planning Commission on it, but we can certainly write code to do whatever it is that you need.
Yeah, as written right now, the conditional use would allow overnight use. And so that's a new use that hasn't been allowed before. So if you want to differentiate out day shelters,
It would allow overnight use in those emergency situations, or would it be year-round?
year-round.
Right.
They were waiving the temperature considerations, I think.
Yes, that's correct. It's no
How-
longer an emergency issue unless you want to differentiate out these different uses into day shelters, day centers, emergency warming or cooling shelters, and then permanent overnight shelters.
So where does transitional housing fall in that? Is that not even a part of this? That's a different
Well,
issue?
that was the original name that we had used, and we were going through the project advisory team process, and we took the word transitional away.
And what is the transitional housing now called under the new name?
Shelters.
Shelter.
I can read the definition.
Well, thank you, because that helps me a lot.
Well, I can read the definition for shelter if you like.
Yeah.
The
One and
definition
the
for
same.
shelter means a congregate facility designed to provide housing to shelter families and individuals offered on a short-term basis. Shelters may offer meals, lodging, and associated services on site aimed at helping people move towards self-sufficiency. Shelters may include day shelters, cooling or warming shelters, and other similar shelters. Shelters are not considered bed and breakfast inns, boarding houses, hotels, or motels.
And what is the definition of short-term?
Right.
Yes, we talked about that a lot, actually, at Planning Commission. At one point, there were numbers of, it can only have someone for X amount of dates, and then that was, the Planning Commission had taken that off. We heard testimony that that's rather hard to regulate, but the point of the shelter is that it's short-term, and so as long as we say that it's short-term, that gets there to cross.
No, that definition wasn't sufficient. I looked at it and I was reading, at one point it said transitional shelters not to exceed 90 continuous days. There's no provision, okay, I interrupted it for a day and then I started over. There's not X amount of days in the time. It's just so open that I'm not, until it's, the terminology is strictly defined and the limits of use are defined.
They
I don't-
would be defined through the conditional use. So the conditional use would put parameters on that particular use, the number of people, I mean, those sort of types of things.
But for example, regardless of what time period, if we said you can stay there 30 days, and then can we start the clock over if I leave for 24 hours? See, there's nothing in there that
That's why
says-
we avoided it. I mean, it's how they're designed. They're designed to have you sleep on a mat on the ground is what we heard earlier. That's not a permanent facility. There's services to help incentivize that as a
Right.
transition.
Well, that
I
definition
agree.
needs to be firm.
I agree with Commissioner Lyles Smith. I think this is not quite baked yet. And I think sending it back to the Planning Commission and giving them an opportunity to work with the Homeless Solutions Coalition, and then, get this firmed up with, better definitions and some other stuff, I would be supportive of sending this back to the Planning Commission.
I mean, it's really important, and it needs to be timely, i.e. before we need to start standing up warming and emergency shelters again, preferably. I know that seems like it's a long way away, but timing-wise, we need to tackle this issue, not let it linger.
Right. But
Yeah.
at the same time,
But I want to do it right.
I don't want to have this, I don't want to make this definition of what the day shelter or whatever you call it. I don't want to take it away from the conditional use process because, if you don't make that a conditional use, then any Tom, Dick, and Harry can come grab a building and open a day shelter. And this is the only thing that we have that allows us to have some regulation over that. So is there a motion?
If you do send it back to planning commission, if you could just give me clear guidance on what the input they need to have. If you do
Fix
want a
it.
separate definition, if you want some is from, like, give me more.
Commissioner McGriff?
I am not comfortable with sending it back to the planning commission. But I agree with what's been said, but there are more organizations, well, excuse me, the Homeless Coalition is not the only organization that needs to have input on this. The community at large needs to have input on this because I can tell you, as I've stated before, in my Fred Meyer discussions, this is the #1 topic. Every meeting of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, this topic comes up consistently, not necessarily negatively, but in the fact that where was the input from the community prior to the establishment of these facilities, and there wasn't any. So it can't just be one group making the determination, because to me, that's a little bit self-serving, which is okay in some cases, but there's other people in this community that need to have input into this besides the Homeless Coalition.
Which is why sending it back to the planning commission is the perfect way to get that, give those people the opportunity to testify.
Well, I think it's not a testifying issue. It is a discussion issue before it gets to a public hearing process. That has never happened in Oregon City, to my knowledge.
So is there a motion?
So I'd like to have it come back to us to make a determination of what type of, or you can tell us what type of a process would be appropriate, because again, going through a hearing process doesn't allow for real citizen involvement and discussion. It needs to be people sitting across from each other at a table, having a discussion about what is the best thing for Oregon City.
Yeah.
Not just what's the best thing for this group or that group.
I understand your fascination with public participation, but at some point, you know, again, the public got a chance to participate the second Tuesday in November, and they get that opportunity every 2 years. So at some point, we have to take responsibility for the things that we're doing. And, you know, everything can't be done by, you know, community input.
Yes, it can.
No, it can't. The fact is that information comes up from staff and from the planning commission and other folks, and then we have to make a determination. We take public testimony, we take public input, we listen to the neighborhood associations, we have the CIC. The fact is that I agree with Commissioner Lyle Smith, this isn't quite ready yet, and I want the planning commission to do the heavy lifting as far as, you know, figuring out the rules and how it's supposed to work, but I definitely am not in favor of not requiring conditional use for day shelters. I think they still need to have a conditional use, because that's our only possibility
You and I
of
agree
regulating.
on that point, Dan.
And I'm not in agreement of shelters in all residential areas of the city.
You mean no shelters in residential areas?
This says conditional use for up to 10 beds in all residential districts, and I'm not in agreement with that
I was on the
piece of the
losing end of that.
recommendation.
I was on the losing end of that vote as well.
So again, I think maybe do you have comments on what you think as far as how to best pull together a group to work on this before we send it back to the planning commission?
So there has been a lot of discussion on the public regarding this. This was one of the key components of the equitable housing group as well. So there was, we had a charrette, or I don't know what we called it, some public input, and shelters was the main topic of that, and other events during the equitable housing group recommendation. So I'm slightly confused. I can send it back to planning commission. I just need to know what I am telling them, why it's coming back, what you need direction on. It sounds like the conditional use part for a bulk of it is still good, but you want them to do what?
I would like definitions on the terminology so that it's firm and clear. I would like a limitation on use. How long can these things be? Is it 15 days? Is it 30 days? Is it 6 months? I would like to understand that I don't want to play games with something that says I left for 24 hours and I started the clock again. Some kind of firm definition on what this product is we're trying to bring to bear and how it works, and I don't have that
So
tonight.
the problem with the definition that we have proposed before you is that there's no time limitation. I just want to repeat back so I know.
Yes.
Okay. So a time limitation built into the definition. Okay.
Frank, are you talking about the occupancy?
Yeah, I
time
don't want
limit?
it to turn into a long-term. I
Okay,
mean,
so you're talking about
it's a trend.
occupancy, not necessarily the use.
No, the original intent was transitional.
Right.
And out of respect for Nancy, guys, I understand transition takes a long time
Yes, it does.
occasionally. But what are the limitations on that? Is it never ending, or is there some incentive to make that transition?
Well, and I think that the zones in which we allow or we want those two things to occur and the processes associated with those two different camps should be different. I don't think we're gonna have agreement that, you know, how we treat shelters is the same way we treat day centers. Clearly, they're different uses. I think we should treat them as such and make sure that the policies we come up with can support this community and the services that they need. Should we let Nancy Ide speak? She's requested to
Just one
speak.
second. I think I just, in responding to Commissioner O'Donnell, I think we, you know, hopefully we have the flexibility to, I mean, the part of the conditional use is to evaluate the proposal based on what they're intending to do. And let's say we come up with 60 days. What if someone comes in with a proposal for something that's a really great program, but their program runs 90 days? Does that mean it's not allowed in Oregon City? So I mean, part of the conditional use is to evaluate the proposal, whether that's a 30-day facility, an overnight facility, a 60-day facility, a 90, I don't know what the proposals could be. They could come in very differently. That's why, I mean,
Let me take a shot at the logical piece of this, Frank. So if you're gonna have a shelter, it's gonna be full. So whoever is filling the bed doesn't really matter. Because you're still gonna, if they're gonna have 10 beds, those 10 beds are gonna be full all the time. It just depends on who's in them. So what difference does it make if you say they can only be there for 30 days or 60 days? You're still gonna have a facility wherever it is that's gonna have 10 people in it every day.
That may be true, but there has to be some incentive. I mean, if the terminology originally was transitional, to transition and not make it a never-ending lifetime event. And secondly, I'm going to agree with Commissioner Lyle Smith on where these are placed. So we can have those differences of opinion, but our first steps are let's clear up the language and come up with a proposal through staff that we can
So is there a motion?
discuss.
Do you wanna let?
Oh, I think we've heard it all.
Commissioner Ide, you wanna come up?
Yes. So I think that all of your comments have been really good, and I'm completely supportive of taking it back to the Planning Commission and working with the Planning Commission in a public process where we can invite anybody and everybody to come and talk. I think that that's very important. The other thing I think that's important is that we need a professional, maybe there's someone at the county or someone that knows, that works regularly with housing and shelters we can find someone, you know, that we can consult with in some way, that we can find funding for that or something. I don't know. I don't have that information right now, but we just need somebody that works with this on a regular basis to help us with this, I think. In listening to you talk, you're all got good ideas, but you're all kind of going, yeah, I don't know. I don't understand this because I've never had to go through this before. The other thing is that when other businesses are, you know, operating in the city and then the city changes the code, we don't make them go back and have to comply with the code. We grandfather them in. And the Father's Heart has been operating for 6 years in the same place successfully, not without any problems, but they shouldn't have to go through the conditional use, I don't think, because they've been operating, and why would we single them out and say, well, you need to have a conditional use when we don't do that for others? So that's just kind of a thing I have about that. And it might even be for both of those warming shelters, as I indicated earlier in my comments. You heard the people tonight, we need the warming centers. And we have to do everything that we can to allow those to stay open. Any future day centers that might come up, you know, within reason and in the locations that you want them to be in, I don't have a problem with that, but I do have an issue with making the Father's Heart all of a sudden have to go through this conditional use process. Any future ones,
Can I ask Carrie a
I
question,
wouldn't.
please? Sure. Carrie, it's my understanding we closed the public hearing, and this sounded kind of a lot like testimony to me. So are we, I don't think procedurally
The
we are.
commission can decide in
I agree.
legislative matter to
Okay,
take more
just wanted-
testimony
just
when
wanted
it
to make sure.
elects to do that.
Just wanted to
So
make sure.
there wasn't an objection to the proposal to let Commissioner Ide speak, so that's what.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear because
Oh, she would have stopped us.
Are you finished?
I am. We can come up with definitions that I'm sure
Okay,
would
thank you.
be fine.
So we're running out of time. So is there a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to take this item back to the planning commission with the direction we've given to Ms. Turway.
Can you summarize that direction?
No, I can't. You can summarize it and we can agree
All
or
right, we'll look at
disagree.
permitted uses, we'll look at the definition.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. So that dies for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
What's the other motion?
Then we're gonna push this off, to the first meeting in, May. If y'all can't make a decision.
Is there any information you would like staff to provide to you at the first meeting in May?
some definitions.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful.
So, moving on. Is this the last one, Pete?
We have
No.
three more.
Okay, then, we only have 12 minutes left.
Unless the commission decides to continue.
And that has to be unanimous, and I'll tell you right now, it's not gonna be.
I just want to get it done.
So, I would suggest that we push the rest of this stuff out to the first meeting in May and, then continue with the agenda.
Is there one of them that's easier than the others that we can just deal with now?
12 minutes, I
The,
agree.
We have other things.
the remaining item include lot averaging,
Nope.
off-street parking requirements, and the
No.
annexation factor for trees.
No.
They are lengthy discussions.
Okay, so push the rest of that off to the May meeting. We'll move on to general business. 19-247, the 2019-2021 City Commission biennial goals. Mr. Conkle?
Thank you. This was continued from the last meeting. We prepared the draft 2019 through 21 commission goals based on what we worked through at the retreat earlier this year. We've included the minutes from the retreat, a draft of the proposed goals, a redlined version of that, and as well as the comments that were received from Commissioner Lyle Smith for your discussion and consideration tonight.
Anybody want to go?
I thought Rachel's comments were really good, and I think we should incorporate them.
And I would agree with that, because I think if you don't measure something, you don't succeed in it. She asked about milestones and how to establish those. I thought the comments were well-founded.
So is there a motion?
I would so move that we adopt the 2019-2021 goals with the amendments as proposed by Rachel Lyle Smith.
Can I,
That would include the implementation of milestones.
am I making those milestones up? So,
Yeah,
Sure.
those were kind of discussion items.
So for the first one, and I'm sorry, it's getting late, Willamette Falls Legacy Project, continue to work with the property owner to determine future private development on the site, including funding, infrastructure, parking, and development strategies. That is what we're working on with a private property owner through grants. I would almost, trying to identify a milestone for something that I don't have 100% control over We can, we've applied for grants, we're looking at,
Well, we have zero control over it.
well, but there are things that we've been doing. We've been looking at infrastructure, the private infrastructure. I've thought about this, I'm not sure, trying to be more specific about, because I'm not sure what we're gonna be able to do or not do on the site. I mean, part of me would just take it out. And we'll just continue to, as opportunities arise, go after those. I mean, I think that there's support for identifying and reducing barriers to investment on that property. I'm not sure exactly what I would put as a specific measurable milestone over the next 2 years for what's gonna happen on the private side.
I don't think milestones is appropriate for this specific item, but I do think we would agree on some kind of reporting structure, updates at X amount of intervals that we would know. I mean, I know you can't control the private parties in these transactions.
So that was the first
I mean, you
one.
could say goals, but that's us setting goals for parties that we have no control over.
Right, and I think that, we had heard through the work session was that, the commission would like to hear more frequent updates about the partners meeting where we're at with the project, so we fully intend to implement that. I think it's up to the commission to decide if you want something like that in your goals. I think of that more as a task that staff is going to do than something here.
So what do you want to change?
You're just trying to
I'm just trying to address the comments because all of them were taken and some of these, I like, trying to identify milestones on some of these, I think is measurable milestones of you shall complete 1,000 feet of sewer. I struggle on a couple of these because they're very aspirational and they're gonna continue for years to come.
Sure. We are masters of the aspirational document. So I feel that milestones are appropriate for the Beaver Creek employment area. I mean, we're talking about a key project in this community where we want demonstrated results over a period of time. We should set goals. If we don't reach them, then we reevaluate them. They're not cast in stone, despite the fact they're called milestones. Maybe they're aspirational milestones.
Okay, so Beaver, here's another, continue the partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, Clackamas Community College, and Clackamas County Business and Economic Development to continue the marketing and development initiative efforts to bring investment and employment opportunities to this area. Once again, this is gonna be a public-private partnership to try to develop the lands in those employment areas. Is it,
So what's the city's role in that? You've got these private parties, what's our role?
right, so we continue the marketing and the development initiative efforts. So trying to identify funding, we're gonna see when Myers Road is built between High School Lane and 213, all of a sudden, those are gonna be our first shovel-ready employment area sites held by private owners that we have in the city. So how do we work with them to make that happen? Realizing that I can bring you multiple buyers. If you're not willing to sell, you're not willing to sell, right? And so a couple of these, I'm just struggling to identify what you want. I mean,
Let's do this, okay? Why don't you sit down with Commissioner Lyle Smith and see if you guys can't come up with wording that that satisfies both of you and bring it back to us?
Well, I think, the wording is fine. I was just posing some questions for discussion. The challenge with this document is it's mixing goals, priorities, and milestones. And it's hard to see, I don't know, it's just hard to parse all of that out. It just kind of mixes them all together. And so, I was just asking some general questions because I like to, at the end of the biennium, I like to be able to look at something like this and say, were we successful? And so, if this is something, some of these, I'm not sure what the milestone would be, like you said, which is why I was questioning, for me, should it be on here? But maybe then I was like, well, if this is a priority, if we're making this a priority for the city, then we leave it on there and it is what it is. These were kind of just
I think
discussion comments.
those were the two that I just really struggled with, just because it is really, some of it is cooperation with owners that are out of our control. Some of it is just opportunities that are gonna arise through either grant funding, projects that we're able to do, additional funding that may come in from the partners. So it was really trying to prioritize that, for Willamette Falls, it's somehow we've got to continue to drive the private property, and what that might look like is unknown, but that we are supportive of going after those opportunities when they arise, whatever they may be.
And that's a nice general statement, but I mean, I don't want to get 2 years down the road and say, we're at the jumping off, we haven't accomplished, we haven't moved the project forward. So I mean, I know we're talking about an economic development person. Hopefully they've got a plan, and whether it comes to fruition or not, that they have, I want to recruit X amount of possible candidates. I want to make sure we get this site ready. I mean, those are goals that may or may not, but at least they're steps over a 2-year period rather than no measurements whatsoever.
Maybe the category needs to be changed. Maybe you shouldn't call it milestone. Maybe it could be something else. I don't know what it is.
Mr. Parna?
Thank you, Mayor Holliday and City Commissioners. Absolutely recognizing the wisdom of kind of looking for more clarity on some of the steps that we could accomplish over time. And could I suggest that the direction that I'm hearing from the commissioners, maybe these goals could be adopted, and also it could be made clear that the city manager could work with staff and start to develop milestones that can be presented to the commission in the future as well, because it's pretty clear that that's important to a lot of folks. I know city manager as well. It's probably, we're probably talking about two different things: your goals and aspirations in terms of coming forward with what we want to accomplish, and a very clear message that I'm hearing from all the commissioners, that having a sense of some things that, and some pointed milestones to accomplish are important, and asking the city manager to move forward with that as well.
I'd agree with that summary.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Call roll, please.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Jim, we're gonna move this, your resolution to the next meeting.
Mayor, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
This can take 3 minutes unless you have a bunch of questions.
Well, you don't have 3 minutes, that's the problem.
The resolution for us to go, a resolution that you already did is dependent on this, about the
And
new.
they can't wait 2 weeks?
Well, yeah.
Okay. So, consent agenda, is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I would so move.
Second.
Call roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
and Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Do you have any critical communications, Mr. Conklin?
No, sir.
Then we're adjourned.